All right. Hello, everyone coming in. Welcome to the Culture Clinic, episode 12. Today, we're going to be talking about modernizing milestone programs. Yes, thanks so much for showing up. This is the Culture Clinic show where we help people, leaders shape great workplace culture so that your people are inspired to do their best work. Hello, my name is Julia. I'm on the people team here at Gusto, and I'll be hosting today's show. I'm joined here with Kwesi. Kwesi, I'll pop it over to you for an introduction.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the 12th. I can't believe it was 12 already of these Culture Clinic shows. I'm Kwesi Thomas. I am an HR vet by background. I've been in HR for about 20, 21, 22 years. Don't date myself there, but and had some fun times at companies like Nortel and BlackBerry, Shopify, and then did some smaller companies, some startups for the last 5 or 6 years, and then some consulting. So I love talking about culture. It's and recognition. It's one of my passions, and hopefully today I can be of some use to you.
Awesome. Great. So a little bit of housekeeping just before we get started. If you're finding that the LinkedIn Live is a little bit choppy, Kaylee's going to put the YouTube link in the comment section so you can hop over there for a more seamless viewing experience. And then the other thing is just that this is an AMA, so ask me anything format. So do feel free to leave any questions that you have for Kwesi or myself in the comments on LinkedIn or on YouTube, and we'll be sure to address them. And yeah, so I think we'll hop in. Today's session is all about modernizing milestone programs. So I think, recognizing employees for long tenures, whether kind of, 2, 3, 5, 10, 15 years, is a no-brainer. And it's a great program that a lot of organizations have. But today we're going to talk about what might be lacking in those programs and what organizations can do to have a really effective and sort of modern milestone program to recognize folks, not just for tenure, but also for other accomplishments as well. Kwesi, let's jump in. The first thing is kind of like, let's start with the definition. What is a milestone program? What are we talking about when we're talking about milestone programs?
For most companies, milestone programs and service award programs are probably interchangeable in terms of how they're using the name. So typically a program that's rewarding service or tenure is often what we use that word for. The word's starting to change a bit to rewarding other milestones, and that could be career milestones or life milestones as well. And so for me, I like that broader definition. It's the tenure or service rewards, but also talking about other milestones like life and professional milestones. Right.
Cool. Yeah. And what other milestones might there be? Like, let's get into a little bit of kind of the accomplishment side of things and what that kind of milestone might look like.
Sometimes it's accomplishing a milestone that is, like, for example, I'll pick finance. Sometimes it's celebrating the milestones that may come along in earning that CA or CFA or what other programs there are. I've seen it with actuarials where they've got certain milestones where they've got to achieve as they get certified. I know architects have served similar programs, and so sometimes it's recognizing milestones that might be professional in nature. It could be milestones that are happening personally. That could be, expanding the family, or it could be something more like bereavement. And so there are other milestones that happen along the journey of our employees that aren't purely just, I'm going to be very crude about service awards, because that's just sitting in the seat for a year or for 5 years or for whatever, right? To earn them, you have to be there, and that's kind of the definition of what's there. And so I love pushing on that definition a bit and rewarding things that are a bit more, or recognizing things that are a bit more, they're milestones. They're not just, they don't happen by accident.
Yeah, totally. And, when I think of a program like recognizing people for completing, a CPA exam or something like that, I think, how does that work? Like, how do you design a program where, some roles and some tracks, accomplishments are very clear cut. And in others, they might be a little bit more ambiguous. So how would you recommend someone define a program that is not necessarily like equal? It's not necessarily everyone done XYZ, but it still feels fair and equitable.
I think it really, this all depends on how you build the program. And I think in building all of the programs that are sort of in this, like, I don't know, not just total bucket, but sort of the recognition and the other bucket, as it was way back when. I think you have to build those programs to enable managers to manage their teams, and not just build the
Mm,
programs for the HR police to do it for them, right? And so a lot of this has to do with building programs that allows the flexibility and the fairness that's required for the programs, especially these days, but still has the the guardrails to make sure we don't fall off on either end, right? And so, for me, when building a program or programs, there are definitely some things that are going to be much more global. Like that might just be your service award type programs, which are a bit more global, and there might be some programs that are a bit more tailored to tracks or work streams or different things. But you just want to make sure that they're fair and they're built into your strategy, right? Um, I'm a big proponent of making it make sense, right? And
mm,
sometimes making it make sense might be you doing something, if you're an insurance company, in my example, you might be doing something a little bit different for your actuarial team than you're doing for the HR team, right? And so, as long as it makes sense and it's fair, I think you're on the right track for building a great program.
cool. Cool. Awesome. And so why, like, what would you say are the most important elements of a great milestone program? Like, if you're seeing the most perfect milestone program you've ever seen, what's going to stand out about it to you?
Oh my gosh, I've never seen a perfect one, but I've seen really good ones and some bad ones. I think, for me, it's probably a couple elements. One is making sure that the milestone, and you're recognizing the right milestones. I think if you can figure out whether, if it's service and you're doing 5, 10, 15, or if you should be doing 1, 5, 10, figure out the right cadence or the right milestones to recognize, both in service or in life or in career. I think that's a huge aspect of it. The second is how it's delivered, like how that milestone is recognized, and making sure that like the how you're doing it is the right for your culture, the people, the team, and appropriate for the size of the milestone. And then lastly, for me, it's like, sorry, that should include timeliness. And lastly, it's making
Mm,
sure that the actual recognition, the reward, is appropriate and useful. Like I've seen some rewards that they sound good, but nobody actually wants them, right? And so you want to make sure you don't sort of, have a great, you've got the right milestone, you've got the right, you're doing it at the right time, and then you've given them a toaster that they don't necessarily want right now. Nothing wrong with
yeah.
toasters. I use one every day.
Toasters are great, but sometimes
Those
when
are
you've
great.
been a high strong contributor to a company for 5 years, maybe it doesn't feel so good in the end.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah,
Right.
cool. And then you talked a little bit about how the milestone is recognized. Let's like dig into that. What can that look like in terms of, when you think of a retail store where people might have different shifts and like not everybody's going to be in on the same day, or you think of a remote culture, which the way you recognize milestones is going to be completely different. Um, what would you lean into? Like anything come to mind there about the best way, like the how of recognizing
Yeah.
milestones?
Yeah. I hate sitting on the fence with some of these answers, but I'm going to sit on the fence a little bit. It really depends on what your culture is. If I've got a culture. Let's take some of us, like, in the startup world, where there is a weekly or a bi-weekly or some often stand up that happens often. It's really easy to throw some of those milestone recognitions and to do them as part of that stand up. And that culture might also be in that sort of group celebratory culture as well, because you're probably also recognizing, you know, your MRR for your revenue for the month or for the week or whatever else is happening. So that might be appropriate in that setting, where you might have another company that is much more remote or not as there isn't that big group meeting like retail, where you
Mm,
want to recognize it, make sure the person feels recognized, and that connection might come directly from their leader or their manager, etc. But it may not be in a group set and in a setting like a stand up or a meeting. And so it's got to be right for the style of business that you run as well as the culture you're managing. But I think for me, getting that right is important. So you don't want to, wait until the quarterly meeting to recognize, an anniversary that happened 2 months, 2.5 months ago. And so you've got to make it right for you.
Totally. Almost like if you were going to be building a milestone program or starting a milestone program, like there's probably an element of celebration that's happening already. And
Yeah.
so probably better to make the program fit like the current culture rather than trying to say, oh, starting now, we're going to do this thing that like nobody's doing any piece of, and it would be totally out of left field.
Yeah, you're usually trying to amplify something that's probably organically happening already, or that you might be doing in a smaller program that you're now building upon that's working well. So hopefully you can, we've talked a lot about crawl, I do this wrong, crawl, walk, run. And so you might be building on something that you're already doing, rather than just trying to shove in something that's completely inorganic to your culture.
Hmm. Totally. And then we've talked around this a little bit already, but um, why is it important to learn about modernizing your milestone program? Like, what are sort of traditional milestone programs getting wrong right now? Where's the room for opportunity?
For me, I think this is a tough one, but for me, I think what's changed, people and culture has changed. Like what people expect is different, right? And what and in time seems to be moving faster in terms of work, right? And so I think waiting for the 5 year mark to recognize someone's service is a long time in this day and age, especially if you're a startup or a high tech or a fast paced growing company. I think back to some examples in my own career where, um, like I was at Shopify, they recognized, I think it was either month 1 or month 3, but it was like a gift certificate to go for dinner, right? And um, just some of those things that happened earlier on to sort of like as we were forming, norming, storming that relationship between you and the company, they just helped accelerate that connection. I think it's important to do that. The opposite end is replacing someone in a shorter time, right? And so I think that programs get, I think some of the length is too long, and sometimes I think that the dollar spend is often too small. And I believe
Mhm.
that firmly. I think if you've got to 5 years, you're spending 150 bucks after 5 years. I mean, you're budgeted 20 bucks a year over the last 5 years. I just think sometimes that the sizes are wrong. Again, now they weren't wrong. Maybe when I was doing the BlackBerry program, for example, 15 years ago, it probably wasn't wrong, right? Or 15 years ago. Now I think it probably is wrong, right?
Mhm.
And so I think getting the size right and getting the cadence right is hard.
Yeah. It's hard to find the sweet spot there too, right, though? Because if you do a cadence that's too frequent, then your program's gonna get really expensive really fast.
Correct.
But if you're waiting too long and the rewards are too insignificant or kind of irrelevant, then you're missing it too. So probably finding something like it has to work for your company and your budget as well, right?
Correct. I mean, for me, this wasn't if you got a large company, the number will sound large, right? If you
Yeah.
got 100, 200 people and you're growing quickly, you might be talking about 200 people, 20 people a year, 30 people a year, 40 people a year. If you're hyper growthing, so the numbers don't get too scary until you get to have 20,000 employees, celebrating a ton of anniversary, and you're growing. But at that point, I always argue that the cost of replacing that person is astronomically larger than these small pieces investing in recognition and in milestones and programs like that to tie them to the company for a longer time.
Totally. Yeah. And then let's like jump into that a bit more of why have a milestone program? You just mentioned, re- the benefits of it outweighing replacement costs.
Yeah.
Anything else come to mind, or is it just sort of like a good thing to have as part of your total rewards and recognition program?
The why have a milestone program? For me, it's one of a few reasons, though one of the reasons might be more important to your or a particular organization at the time. Retention is one, right? And I think, especially in the early, I really like milestone programs in the early days, right? I know they also serve well when you're getting to the 15 and 20s and the true
Mm,
long service. But I think in that early stage when you're actually forming that relationship between the employer and the employee and the manager and the employee and try to really build that relationship, I think it does well in building that retention early on. um, I think it does well to recognize people for the years of service, especially the dedicated employees who've been there for a long time. Um, Though I do think it helps with employer brand, I don't. I think it's one of many things that help with employer branding, unless you've got a very crazy program that's being written up in articles. Um, and I think if it's part of your overall strategy, if have you built your total rewards or your people strategy, and it fits as part of the other pieces that are working together, it can really work well in terms of building on the values and the culture that you're building. And so, depending on what is important to you at the time, um, one of those will be more important, but they will all factors in why you'd have a program like this.
Totally. Yeah, it's interesting of how it can you can we talk about spot recognition a lot to reinforce values, but milestone programs like this could also be a good reinforcer of values. And we think at Gusto, one of our core values is learn. And so maybe it's something where, when somebody uses their, full learning and development budget, which we would love people to do more of, and they go to a conference or they finish a course, maybe that's a good opportunity for managers to sort of connect with the HR team and sort of say, hey, this person just, it's not a year milestone, but it's still a milestone. And can that be something we recognize? So sort of branching it like from spot recognition into milestone recognition.
Correct, and I think you're bang on. I think there's a lot of use in terms of of these milestones, recognizing these milestones that do well for also calling out what's important to you. And I'll pick your example just now. We always hear people, what are the important things to why do you work here? What's important to you? And learning is always one. But why not call that flag that hey, we the company think it's important that you actually achieve some of that learning, and so we put that milestone there because it's important. And so I
Yeah.
think the more you can, it takes some thinking. It's not a, hey, we throw up a program that works. It does take some thinking to weave the different programs as well as your strategy and your goals and the culture building together. But I think to me, if you can get to that point where these programs reinforce each other and reinforce your strategy and your goals, especially your values, I think these programs become really effective, right?
Hmm.
Rather than just another program that's got stakes in the ground, right? We just did it because we're supposed to do it.
Totally. No, it's interesting. And we kind of joked about sitting on the fence with some of these answers, but so many of the answers to how to build a milestone program is what is your culture and what are you trying to accomplish and what do you do already that you can build off of? So
Yeah,
learning it is huge to us. So let's weave it into our milestone program.
correct.
Cool. Awesome. Um, okay, let me just try to see some of the questions we've got coming in. Okay, we've got a question. I'm trying to find a milestone gift that will appeal to our diverse workforce without offering something outdated like a pen or like a toaster, like you mentioned before. What meaningful rewards have you seen offered? So, Kwesi, what comes to mind here, or in your experience, like, do you have any great milestone rewards that have really stood out to you?
Um, it's a great question. I mean, when building these programs, looking for often we're choosing a partner or somebody else who's going to help us with the rewards, etc. I think make sure that the offering from that company makes sense for your culture and what you're building as well, right? And so, for some people, that might be a program that is a bit more, product focused versus one that has flexibility and is more gift card focused, or may have charity or experiences built in. And I think, rather than those options being just they're really cool to put in there. I think if again building it back into what you're trying to do, right? So if you've got a company that's really built on, I've got a limited vacation, I want you to go out there and see the world, right? Travel. We've been all encouraging those things. Then the rewards that might be more tied to experiences might make more sense for the strategy you're really trying to encourage, rather than another program that another company that has a different strategy. So I think tying it to I almost say tying back to a bigger strategy is going to always make sense to me. I think flexibility and choice is important in these programs within that strategy, not just for flexibility and choice sake. For me, I've seen some. I mean, I thought the gift card early on from Shopify was really cool.
Mhm.
I've emulated that in a few other places, or I've recommended it in a few other places. Um, I really like when I've done some experiences where I've gotten Raptors tickets from different ones. That could be I can tell a good story and a bad story from those ones, but I have gotten it where it has been positive as well. But which I thought was really cool. Um, for me the ones where you get to celebrate or enjoy the milestone with the people you want to spend time with is important. And
Mhm.
because if you're really pushing through, especially a lot of us in our careers, um, our work pulls us away from those people. And so for me, a lot of the milestone programs or rewards from these programs where they pull you further away to go do something else away from them, I often like making sure there's choices to actually spend time with those people.
Totally. Cool. I think one of my favorite milestone gifts that I've received, I was working in outdoor camps and outdoor education and summer camps. And at the 5-year mark, after you've been there for 5 summers, you got a paddle, a canoe paddle. And it was lovely and engraved and like really sentimental for what the culture was and, you know, what the
Right.
job was. It's interesting because when I think of like best practices milestones, like that's probably not one because it's not something I use every day and it's not something that like um that like chose or anything like that, but the sentimentality and the culture that was at this organization really kind of outweighed those pieces. So I think that's an example of like knowing your culture and knowing what people are going to find
Right.
you know, personal and sentimental as well.
Interesting enough, when you say that, I was thinking, I was racking my brain for what ones I've received. I have a lot of those like crystal awards and those type of like plaque looking things I put on my desk, which I have no idea where they are anymore,
Yeah,
or they're somewhere around when I changed jobs or whatever else. And so that's what I mean by for me, not that those there are people who would think that that's right for their culture. For me, a lot of the companies I thought that those were didn't make sense, right?
totally. Yeah, cool. Um, and then this is a good one. This is one that I don't necessarily have an amazing answer to, but right now I handle all my milestone gifts manually with calendar reminders. I feel you. This process takes a lot of time, and the company keeps growing, making it even more difficult for me. Is there a less manual way that I can approach this?
The short answer is yes. Long answer is depends on your company. If you've got a company of 20,000 people, you might be running a report every month or every quarter and trying to do all that stuff manually. You might have an HRIS that sends you reminders or sends out emails and does some things to help you with that. Or you've gotten, if you're at the point where you've partnered with a provider, right? Like a Gusto who can actually automate the awards and trigger the reminders, trigger the emails, trigger the actual reward, and do some of those things. And so I think a long time ago, you used to have to be a large company to partner with one of the large providers who did these type of programs. There are now companies like Gusto that can automate or set these programs up, even if you've got 100 or 200 or 500 employees. You don't have to be 20,000 employees before you go and partner with a supplier, and how their pricing works. It works really well. I say this from experience because I was years and years ago running reports and had an employee in my team sending out emails and setting out baby baskets and flowers, and we would receive the crystals and have to mail them out to the manager 2 weeks before, and I've done all those things. And so for me, the change, one of the really positive things that changes with the new providers and their ability to take care of a lot of this work really does make these programs a lot more um, manageable than they used to be.
Totally. Yeah. And you think of the employee engagement side of that too. Like most people don't join HR teams to go to the mail 3 times a week and that kind of thing, right? So it also allows your people team to be working on things that are going to be higher value for the organization and probably make them enjoy their time working with you a little bit more.
I could go
But
on
yeah,
and
I
on.
know that. Sorry.
I could go on and on about nightmare stories of Chris Award being shipped from Waterloo to France and then not arriving on time and then not finding it in the mail, and the amount of emails and conversations about getting that award to the person who's at the 5-year mark. That stuff should be like, that's not where we want to spend our time as HR professionals.
Totally. You also never want an employee to be like following up and being like, hey, like I had my 5 months or my 5-year mark 6 months ago. Like, I haven't gotten my thing yet. And it's like, oh, that
Yeah,
doesn't feel good for the person either. So the more you can kind of offload this and automate it, the better. And I know that when we introduced automated awards at Gusto, the effect of that has been really huge. And
yeah,
calendar reminders and that kind of thing are all a lot more automated now, which is super nice.
yeah. I will say this: I do still believe delivering the award needs to be personal. Like that's something for the company should be saying, like not delivering it like physically handing them the person the card or whatever. I'm talking about recognizing the milestone. There should still be an element of that isn't a formatted triggered email that just came out from some platform that says thank you for your 5 years, blah 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 blah. You press the link below to receive your reward. Don't do that. Like, I know there's some process work that needs to be done to give them that. Like, that has to still happen, but you still got to. Somebody should be saying, "Hey, 5 years you've been with us. Think of all the things you've done over the last 5 years, the journey we've been on. I've been here for 4 months, but I heard great stories about you." Like, all of that's still important, right?
And if you're not, you're just, if you're not doing that, you're missing such a huge opportunity to reinforce your values, reinforce what you want to see in employees, and kind of, set your employee up for what they should be spending more time doing and what they should really be leaning into in terms of their skill set. Like, it's just such a huge opportunity.
Completely.
Yeah. Cool. Let's see. We've got 5 minutes left here. Let's talk about sort of outside the box ways of recognizing, but outside the box things that you might want to recognize someone for. So we've talked a lot about moving away from just tenure and just, amount of years in the seat. And we've glazed over a couple other things, but what else could there be? Like, let's dig into some of the various milestones that our employees might be celebrating that you might not think are worth recognizing, but could totally fit into your program.
Family growth, and I say that's whether that's birth, adoption, whatever else, and how you want to define those programs. I think it's worth recognizing the milestone. Whether there's a budget towards that, whether it's just a reminder so that somebody recognizes it, I think that's important. Same with bereavement, like the loss or major illnesses. I think both. For me, I've run programs in companies in the past that have those two elements, and I've been in places where they don't, and I really believe it creates a real honest human connection between the employees and the people that lead them. In a lot of cases, even if you don't have a program, your managers or your leaders are still doing it. They're just doing it off of their desks, right? And so I think that's very important, right? And those can be more of guides than they are policy, than they are programs, but I think that's important. So I do definitely think there's some personal milestone that should be recognized. Career wise, I think when people really accomplish it's borders on recognition, but if we've set some goals to achieve something, and whether that's in learning, whether that's in courses, whether that's in proficiency in something, those, especially if we've set the goal and we've set a milestone to achieve, I think recognizing that milestone that we've achieved it is important. I think too often, especially in those professional paths where those milestones actually make the person more marketable and other things. Yeah. I think it's very good to recognize those milestones as well. Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's any other ones that are off the top of my head. Yeah, I think recognizing professional milestones, personal milestones, along with tenure is important, right?
Cool. What I really liked hearing there is that, like, when you talk about family growth or marriage, partnership, or bereavement, I think it's a really awesome opportunity that you can have to show your employees that you value them as whole people. Like, everyone has a life outside of work. Everyone has the rest of their life and family and all this kind of stuff. And so it's a really nice opportunity to showcase that at work, we recognize you for your whole self, not just the 9-to-5 version of you.
Yeah, I think and I think people are moving more and more to expecting or wanting that from the places they work, not just being there to work and leave. And I think, is that every single one person or every single role in every single company? No, but I do think that that the pendulum of that being more common it's definitely been swinging for a few years now, if not more. Right?
Totally. Yeah, and that just goes back to, like, knowing your employees, knowing your workforce, knowing if people want a more personalized thing, or if they're just like not feeling like that would be welcome by them, and that's okay either way. But important to know that.
I would hazard to guess, if you're listening to this podcast, if you're listening to us and thinking about culture and building your culture, you're probably in a workplace that this is going to make sense for, right?
That's true.
Otherwise, you've invested time in something like this, right? So
Awesome. Cool. Well, we're at time, Kwesi. What would be one thing, maybe we talked about it, maybe we didn't get the chance to talk about it, like one key takeaway you'd want everyone to leave with, or one nugget you'd want people to really remember?
Wow. Well, I would have two. I'm trying to figure out how to. I'm trying to pick one in my head.
You could do both. You could do it all.
I get it too. Two nuggets. One, I'll start with one that's probably more over there. Make sure your programs are thought through and are part of your holistic HR, total rewards, value, like your people strategy. And it's not just another program. If you're going to expect, you probably don't have a large budget. Make sure the budget's effective. I think that's really important. And two, I really think the days of having longer where the programs really start at 5 and 15, 10, 15. I do think that you really start to think about making those intervals shorter and more often and more meaningful and connected to the people, and building that connection with your employees at an earlier date through that and right through their tenure there. But I think you can build, start it early and build through their career with you. I think you can start to build a meaningful relationship or retention with that employee through these milestone programs.
Awesome. Cool. I think my big nugget and takeaway would be sort of going back to the crawl, walk, run approach is look at what is already working well. Chances are, say you're retail, chances are one store is probably already doing this really well and probably has a really cool culture baked in. And so if you're looking to run one of these programs regionally or provincially or what have you, take a blueprint that's maybe already working and just grow from there rather than trying to, get every store or every team to adjust to something totally new to them.
Amazing.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks so much, Kwesi, for joining me today. And yeah, thanks everybody for tuning in. We hope you got some valuable info from this. And hope to see you next time.
Amazing. Thanks, Julia. Thanks everyone for listening.
Okay. Bye.